Good afternoon, EEL 6509 students. My name is Brittany English. I am one of your distance learning classmates, and my final presentation will be on estimators that are used in MED, which stands for multi-user detection, as we all know. Today I'm going to talk about the different types of MED receivers that we can use. My topic focuses on the optimal, which is the MLSE. We also have a wide variety of suboptimal. Not all of them are shown in this figure here. These are just some of the popular ones. Most of the different types of receivers are separated into one of two categories: linear, like decorrelator or MMSE, or nonlinear, like multi-stage decision feedback or successive interference cancellation. And MLSE also falls into the nonlinear category. Excuse me. My computer is not happy with me this evening. The MLSE stands for Maximum Likelihood Sequence Estimator. And this is really what I mainly focused on for my final presentation. Obviously it's the optimal method, but the reason it's the most optimal is because it is the most accurate, it has the best results, but it comes at a very high price. It requires very extensive calculations and takes a very long time to compute. So it's not used in any practical system because really we don't have the means to support the computations required. It uses an algorithm called the Viterbi algorithm, and generally for learning purposes we store its information in a trellis diagram, which I'm going to show you in the slides to follow. And here's how we make the decision. We multiply our cross matrix by the signal. Oh, stop. Keep the current scheme and do not show me that message again. And add in some noise, and we decide by finding the minimum. It's either going to be a +1 or -1 of the difference squared. So here's an example that you can see on Wikipedia, is where I got this figure from. And just a simple example to kind of help explain how this very intense algorithm works is if you are healthy or do you have a fever. So you start at this start diagram, and there's a 60% chance you're healthy and a 40% chance you have a fever. So when you go to the doctor, knowing nothing, that's what he says. But if you have a fever, you have a 10% chance of not showing any symptoms, a 30% chance of being cold, and a 60% chance of being dizzy. If you're healthy, you have 10% chance of being dizzy, 40% chance of being cold, and a 50% chance of showing no symptoms. But there's more information if instead of, the first day you go to the doctor, he only knows how you are that day. But the second day, he can know, the day before you were healthy. So now there's only a 30% chance that you have a fever, while there's a 70% chance that you're healthy again. So this is kind of how the Viterbi algorithm works, where it takes into account how did you feel the day before instead of just how did you feel today. So it uses this once you have your algorithm because here in this algorithm, we start and then we decide, do you have a fever, are you healthy, and then we decide what your symptoms are. Well, when you go into the doctor, he's going to say, what are your symptoms, and you have to work backwards. And that's the way how our signals work too. So, if just taking the probabilities that they had before here and multiplying them so that way you have 100% in each of these circles, we can determine if you show up to the doctor and you're dizzy, you have a 1 in 7 chance of being healthy and a 6 in 7 chance of having a fever. If you have a cold, you have a 4 in 7 chance of being healthy and a 3 in 7 chance of having fever. You're normal, you have a 5 out of 6 chance of being healthy and a 1 out of 6 chance of having a fever. And then from here you can still work backwards to say, you know, if you have a fever, there's a 60% chance that you'll still have a fever and a 40% chance of being healthy. So when we're working backwards, we take into account these probabilities here along with the probabilities of what you were before. For example, if on day 1 you are healthy and then you show up on day 2 and you feel dizzy, your probability of being healthy is now 1/7 times this 70%, while your probability of having a fever is 6/7 times the 30%. So that's kind of how it works. And I wrote a MATLAB code that will randomly generate some states based on those previous probabilities here. So when you start out, you have a 60% chance of being healthy, 40% chance of having a fever. You have a fever. It's just following this part up here to generate what our states are. And it generated having a fever on days 2 through 6, being healthy on day 7, having a fever on days 8 through 10. Then I generated the observations once again using these probabilities here. So when you're healthy, you know, having these probabilities of how you feel. When you have a fever, having these probabilities of how you feel. And here's what it generated. You start off, you're normal, you're dizzy, dizzy, you're cold, dizzy, dizzy, cold, dizzy, dizzy, dizzy. Then, as I was explaining here with this algorithm of working backwards, from the states that you could see, which would be like our signal that you receive, I then use the Viterbi algorithm to discover whether you're healthy or have a fever each day, which would be like the signal that the symbols that are transmitted, taking those out of the signal. And it found that I had a fever every day. And how it decided that is, as I showed before, when you're multiplying together, you know, this probability with the 0.6 because you had a fever the day before, so you have a 60% chance of still having that fever. You multiply those two numbers together and you get your percentages here. So each day you see I feel dizzy today, and yesterday was just the starting day, so we had no information. So I multiply the 1/7 times the 0.6, because that's my probability of being healthy, and I multiply the 6/7 times the 0.4, and it gives me a basically 9% chance being healthy and a 34% chance of having a fever. So that's much higher, so we're going to pick the higher one. And I do that for every step, multiplying them together. And it comes out that, as you can see in each step, the probability of having a fever was higher than the probability of being healthy. So we've calculated that every single state was having a fever. And in this example, we picked the correct state 9 out of 10 times, so our bit error rate is 11%. So generally with signals it's a lot more complicated than that, but that's the basic kind of idea of how this algorithm works. And as I said in the beginning, we display this in a trellis diagram to help us visualize how we see the data, and this is just for understanding purposes. But as you can see here, we start out, and these blue lines represent you can either go healthy or you can go have a fever. And once you have a fever, you can either be healthy or you can have a fever. If you're healthy, you can either have a fever or you can be healthy the next day. So that just kind of shows you all of the possible paths. And here's the states, healthy on top, fever on the bottom, and I put in the probabilities each step along the way. And we always pick the highest probability. So you start, fever is higher. And from here, from either going to the 6% or the 51%, you pick 51%. And it's just the same all the way around. So these arrows just show how we've traversed through this algorithm to get our output. Now I used some MATLAB code that was available on the MathWorks website,